Hello, this is Captain Aquarius, coming to you on April 29th, 2018, from the Garden Lounge of Aquarian Airlines Flight 429 from Lake Atitlan, Guatemala to Shanghai, China. Why are we winging our way now towards Shanghai under this full moon, which is in fact one of the world's great sacred days, celebrated by Buddhists everywhere as Wesak, the birthday of Lord Buddha, who is traditionally said to have been born on this Scorpio full moon during the month when the sun is in the sign of Taurus? Well, we can be sure that the subtle money mandarins in Shanghai are not focusing mainly on questions about whether the baby who would be the Buddha was able to walk as soon as he was born, or whether lotus flowers sprang up from his footsteps. No, the Chinese financiers are more likely to be interested in the best way of empowering the Chinese yuan into a currency that can be used for buying oil, so that the new petro yuan can now compete with and even replace the dying American petrodollar as a safe medium of exchange in oil transactions. For a little more about this, you can check Goodbye Petrodollar, Hello Petro Yuan, our video from 2 weeks ago on the Dan First channel at YouTube, at the Aries Black Moon, about the eclipse and evaporation of the petrodollar within the time frame of this year's most important astro event. That is the entry of Uranus the Revolutionary, the innovator, the bringer of change into the sign of Taurus. The implications of this in terms of our money, our standards of material value, and other values will be enormous, because the sign of Taurus is ruled by Venus, the goddess of love, beauty, and all attraction. Therefore, the changes that occur now will affect not only our money, they will affect our love and sexual relationships and our power of manifestation. We looked at 2 weeks ago on April 15th at the Black Moon in Taurus that is coming on May 15th, to give you a month in advance preview of what we can expect when Uranus crosses into Taurus. May 15th is the subject of so much feverish speculation and so much fear and trembling about money that it's being called a time when financial collapse is coming, especially by those people who perceive any kind of change as negative. We'll revisit this drama of the passion of the materialists in our next post for May 15th, which will be the Taurus Black Moon, the beginning of a lunar cycle when changes will naturally manifest. Our purpose now is to do 2 things. One is to look at the full moon chart that is in effect today, because it shows us interim conditions that are building toward the really big changes coming in 2 weeks. We're also going to look briefly at the questions of what backs our money, what makes it stable, what gives it substance and value. Is it based only in material things? Is it based in opinions? This naturally leads us to the crucial subject of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain, which we'll look at more in our next post. So to begin, how can you tell this is a full moon chart? Well, that's right. The sun in the 11th house of the chart, the house of friendship, social activity, social activism, and community, is opposite to the moon here in the sign of Scorpio, in the 5th house of creativity, because the 2 lights are always directly opposite to each other at the full moon. This is the basic full moon setup, and we look at everything else in relation to it. 2 other points that soon get our attention are the 2 horseshoe-shaped moon's nodes that you see here in the 2nd house of our money in the sign of Leo, and the 8th house of other people's money also the house of change in the sign of Aquarius. Look at the positions of these four things. The moon and sun are at 9 degrees of their respective signs, and the two moon's nodes at 10 degrees angled to the axis of the sun and moon. These four symbols, tightly connected with each other, therefore constitute what astrologers call a grand cross. That is, 4 points which may be occupied by planets on the chart that are opposite to each other or are angled in 90-degree positions that inevitably mean conditions of change. One way that you can gauge an astrologer's skill and expertise, is in how he or she sees the 90-degree angle that is called a square. Inexperienced astrologers and those who prefer more conventional interpretations of planetary aspects, that is, angles of relationship, will tend to call the 90-degree square stressful or difficult. More experienced astrologers will tend to look instead at squares as conditions that are levers of change. In that sense, we can say that there are two kinds of planetary aspects: those that represent stability and rest, the absence of change, and those that mean change is at work and may be perceived as pressure and upset and may be resisted. These conditions will inevitably be seen as difficult because most people don't like change. If you imagine that a single 90-degree angle between two planets or other important chart points can mean uncomfortable change, then imagine what is going on if you have 4 points arranged at 90-degree angles. It's no wonder that people who live in fear are so nervous now about what they're going to lose and how they're going to suffer. But people who see change as a possibility of progress, breakthrough, and opportunity are more likely to see the positive value of what is going on here. After all, the North Moon's node, the strengthening, gathering, and building force in group relationships, is very well placed in the sign of our money and indicates that those who can form teams and alliances are going to be making some money. In the opposite 8th house of changes and other people's money, investments, grants, awards, positive income, is the South Moon's node, the stressing, splitting, dissolving force in relationships, group relationships, in the sign of Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus the Revolutionary. So we can expect that there may be some unpredictable changes in distribution of money, radical revisions in or abandonment of traditional rules and structures for the sake of creating economic conditions that will be more creative and equitable, especially because of other conditions that are noticeable in the chart. Jupiter, the banker, the king, the principle of abundance, optimism, and expansion in the 5th house of creativity is in a superb 120-degree angle with Neptune in the 9th house of institutions of wealth, power, and authority. There are possibilities of enormously impactful and beneficial action at a time when necessity is going to be the mother of invention. Notice also that the moon's north node in the 2nd house is in another favorable angle of relationship with Mercury the messenger in the 10th house of our profession in the sign of Aries, indicating strong possibilities of illuminating communication. However, there are complications. Many relationships, professional and personal, may be stressed as people agonize and argue about whether they will have enough money. They may have difficulty holding their marriages family relationships, and friendships together. Business partners who do not trust each other will not find it easy when, in the seventh house of marriage and love relationship, partnerships in general, Mars and Pluto are in conjunction in the sign of Capricorn. The traditional interpretation of this combination is uneasy because Mars, the warrior, is combative, aggressive, and impetuous, and in potentially violent friction with Pluto, the Lord of death and regeneration. There is a strong possibility of premature and therefore costly action by those acting in service only to self. This alignment can signify an ability to exert enormous, even seemingly superhuman effort by individuals and teams willing to take enormous risks and proceed in a way that is arrogant and aggressive without regard for the wishes and feelings of others and the consequences of their own actions, so that those who want to keep it all together and those who want to break it all apart are both very strongly energized at this time. Finally, for now, we notice that Saturn, at 9 degrees of Capricorn, also in that seventh house of partnership and relationship, is opposite to the position of the ascendant on the other side of the chart of Cancer, the sign of the home and the mother. There is necessarily then, at this time, a very strong tendency to hoard and withhold, an attempt to economize, to simplify where expenditures are concerned. People are much less likely to be spending money and much more likely to be holding conditions together conservatively, even stolidly, on the domestic plane. The time for courageous action will come instead at the Taurus Black Moon 2 weeks from now, because it's the beginning of the new lunar cycle and because Uranus, as the bringer of change, will be in the counting house, likely to have some significant impact on our money, what we consider the reality of it to be, and what kinds of risks and decisions we are likely to take where our money is concerned. We'll look more 2 weeks from now at Uranus, the hugely impactful Aquarian revolutionary, and his structure-busting energies that are so inspiring to some and so scary to others, because they represent the liberation of our money and its possibilities, not only from controlling governmental authorities, but also from predatory banks who extract value from our every transaction, eviscerate our economies, manipulate our money supply, and grow unsustainably rich through the issuance of debt that enslaves and impoverishes everybody else. If you were a bankster, you'd find blockchains of cryptocurrencies absolutely terrifying because they're designed to exclude you. If you profit from the existing crooked system, you're among the ones most threatened by the blockchain and cryptocurrencies. You'll attack them with any and all threats of ruin and doom, as though those who are about to be hooked off the stage will even stage Götterdämmerung, the way Hitler did, to take everybody else with him. Consider these questions for now. What backs our money? What created value for us even before we had money? That is, before we began to make coins out of precious metals. What was our standard of value? Was it in the wealth that we see in wall paintings like this one from a tomb at Saqqara, Egypt, showing that if you own all the cows and sheep, ducks and fish, jugs of beer and loaves of bread that all these people were carrying, this would show that you would probably have a life that was pretty secure because it was anchored by all these tangible things. After that, when we began to mint coins out of gold and silver and bronze, the standard of value switched to those precious metals, and we had currency battles of the same kind that we have now. For example, in the 15th century, the Medici bankers in Florence made their florin literally the gold standard of honesty and purity before other currencies like the Venetian ducat and the German thaler of the Fugger bankers rose up to challenge it, followed later by the French franc and the English pound sterling, so called because it was made of silver. When paper currencies evolved, all of them were supposed to have value because they were backed by gold or silver, with the support of different public or private interests that wanted their currency to become the standard. In the United States in the late 19th century, there was a furious controversy over whether the USA should have a bimetallic financial system. That is, a system in which paper money could be backed by and exchanged for both gold and silver. There was a populist movement that wanted to empower people to acquire silver and have it minted into coins, thereby giving the individual person the right to participate in the making of his own money. This was the basis of the free silver movement and the battle between the broad base of people who wanted to keep a bimetallic system and the powerful interests who wanted to establish gold as the sole standard of value. It all climaxed in William Jennings Bryan's famous speech that culminated in the magnificent line, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." Guess who won? The gold bugs, of course, until gold was no longer circulated as currency, and in time, even silver dollars would have to be replaced by silver certificates. Do Americans still have silver certificates now? No. They have Federal Reserve notes, which means that the money is backed by U.S. Treasury securities. In other words, shares in the debt that the Federal Reserve creates by printing money secured only by what could be called the full faith and credit of the U.S. government if the Fed were an agency of government. It is not. It's a private bank, a consortium of U.S. and foreign banks whose collection agency, the Internal Revenue Service, is another private company costumed so cleverly, massive eagle and all, that few people ever ask, how come I have to pay taxes to a private company? The answer is, your money is safe. Don't worry about it. We'll print some more just because we can when we feel like it. The US dollar is, in short, a fiat currency, from the Latin word that means let it be, as in the book of Genesis, when God says, fiat lux, let there be light, and wills it into being. Or Caesar has a proclamation read and then says, fiat, let it be done, because I say it must be. So a fiat currency doesn't have to be backed by anything except the authority of someone who can throw you in jail or drop a drone bomb on your wedding party. Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi found out the hard, lethal way what could happen when they tried to sell their oil in whatever currencies the buyers wanted to pay in lieu of US dollars. What's going to replace the US dollar? The talk naturally goes in two directions. One, toward a currency like the Chinese yuan, which is considered real because it is backed by gold, at least a chance to hedge bets on gold on the Shanghai futures market, or the ruble backed by Russia's abundant energy resources, or by gold and silver, which have always been considered the safest bets. But you know the reality here. There's not enough gold and silver to go around. Even if you could distribute it fairly so that everybody gets some and the banker gets no more than the camel driver, it still wouldn't be enough to make all of us feel safe. So where can we turn? To Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? What backs them? Cryptocurrencies and the blockchain that organizes and protects their transactions are in fact backed only by the desire of people to do business with each other in an honest and equitable way that enables them to trade instruments of value that are clear and transparent, free of control by interfering authorities or plunder and predation by banksters or other parasites. In theory, you can trade anything you want with anyone you want on terms only the two of you decide. You can attract investment in your enterprise without having to report it to anyone or pay anyone to launch your IPO and run the share of your stock or the sale of your stock. So what regulates it? What keeps it honest? There's the thrilling and scary part, because the blockchain relies for its integrity on nothing more and nothing less than the agreement by its members that they will play by simple ethical rules, communicate honestly, keep their agreements in the ways that people will when we respect our community and the value of our community is important to us. Are we really ready at this point in the Aquarian transition to create money that does not need external validation by anything material outside itself, in the same way that we as spiritual individuals can evolve toward freedom by giving up our need for external validation by other people? Yow, we can already feel that iciness in the groin and the crotch, the tingle in the well of dreams at the back of the neck, those dizzy palpitations and other windy sensations that feel like free fall until we understand there is nothing to fear because every way is up. We'll explore this a little more in 2 weeks. For now, why be afraid of our money when our money isn't afraid of us? The only difference between rich people and poor people is that poor people have more opinions about money. So please leave your opinions in the overhead compartments on your flight. And if you lose any opinions as we go, congratulations. Sit back, have some Shaoxing wine, and get ready for the night view of Shanghai. This is Captain Aquarius coming to you on April 29th, 2018.